Hi, everyone, and welcome to Pop Crime TV's The Outlier podcast. I'm your host, Lauren Conlon, and this is part 8 of my coverage into the ritualistic abuse scandal in Utah and the alleged crimes of David Lee Hamblin. As you can see, I am doing things a little bit differently. You can see my face. I'm trying to make this podcast a bit more interactive. Now, with that being said, I will ask for just a little bit of grace as I have a script that I am reading off of because there is just so much information and I want to make sure that I am accurate when I am reporting it to all of you. So I will be looking at my script, looking at you, and again, I ask for a little bit of forgiveness and a little bit of grace. All right, let's get started now that we've gotten that out of the way. Let's get to some housekeeping items. There is a hearing for David Lee Hamblin on Wednesday, March 5th, and this is pertaining to the continuance that was granted in the Manti Sanpete case with survivor TS. Now, as you'll recall, sadly, the American Fork case with survivor ES was dismissed. And we still don't know if that case was dismissed with or without prejudice. I keep refreshing the Utah exchange, and there has been no decision from the judge just yet. But again, with that being said, we should know some next steps in the Sanpete Manti case as of Wednesday, March 5th. That will be done virtually, and I will discuss that after. I've also been going back and looking at Roselle Stevenson's case, and she is the ex-wife of David Lee Hamblin. And just as a refresher, she was arrested in August of 2023 on a first-degree felony charge, and it was starts with S, ends with Y, on a child. A horrific incident that allegedly took place in 1992 with survivor ES. And if that sounds familiar, that's because ES was the one who initially came forward to press charges against David Lee Hamblin. And ES also had communications with Rosie Stevenson. And I discussed those on a previous episode. I actually read directly from filings from David Lee Hamblin's case, defense filings. And Rosie Hamblin's case is a little bit confusing to me at times. It's not quite as clear as David Lee Hamblin's case. And this is because a lot of the filings on the exchange are private. So a lot of the discovery is private. So it's really tough to kind of navigate what exactly is going on. But what I do know is that she will have an in-person status hearing on April 2nd, 2025. Also, I found that she appealed some kind of decision or something to the Utah Supreme Court. And it appears that they had made a decision on February 25th, 2025, a decision to whatever she appealed. And that decision was sent directly to the parties involved. So her attorneys, the prosecutors. I don't have any information on that because it's not disclosed on the exchange, obviously, but I did kind of see what was going on. And I will continue to look into that as best as I can. Her team had filed a motion previously to get the Utah County Attorney's Office off the case, and they won. A judge issued a motion in agreement that the Utah County Attorney's Office should be off the case, stemming from, wow, go figure, the 2022 David Levitt press conference, where he inserted himself as a person of interest. He is a truly disturbed narcissist, in my opinion, and I will pull up the judge's ruling on that decision when they decided to recuse the Utah County Attorney's Office from the case. I'll pull that up in just a minute and I will read directly from that because I think it's really important to understand the domino effect here. And oh, you know what? I should remove David Lee Hamblin's mug from the screen so you don't have to look at that any further. And here is the ruling. And this ruling, let me find it. Okay. This is Judge Robert C. Lunnan, and his decision came, and he was in agreement that there was some kind of conflict between the case against Roselle Stevenson and the Utah County Attorney's Office. So they could not prosecute this case. They cannot prosecute this case, and I'm going to read little bits and pieces of it. So let's start with the introduction. The charge brought against defendant Roselle Anderson Stephen in this case has also been brought against her former husband, David Hamblin. This charge is based on conduct the two defendants allegedly engaged in together in the early 1990s while still married. Mr. Hamblin has faced similar charges in the past, and in April of 2022, he sought to expunge those charges. Those were the charges from 2012 that were later dismissed in 2014, brought forth by his daughter, just FYI. The state of Utah objected to Mr. Hamblin's expungement petition. At the time, the state was represented by the Utah County Attorney's Office, and during the expungement hearing on August 16th, 2022, the office raised the issue of a conflict with the court that would prevent it from remaining as the prosecuting authority for Mr. Hamblin, namely a contentious election between the then county attorney, David Levitt, and his eventual replacement, Jeffrey Gray, that included comments related to the investigations into and the cases brought against Mr. Hamblin, and a suggestion that both were politically motivated. Mr. Hamblin's attorney argued that Mr. Levitt could be called as a witness and might even become a defendant himself. The office, after raising the issue of a conflict, then voluntarily agreed that the entire office should be disqualified. An assistant attorney general present at the hearing then stepped in to represent the case. The attorney general then argued against the expungement because there was an ongoing investigation into Mr. Hamblin concerning the same victims or the same case as the underlying charges in the expungement matter. The attorney general also stated that any future charges stemming from the investigation would be filed by the AG because of the office's disqualification. The office did not seek to clarify or object the parameters of the AG's role in prosecuting cases related to Mr. Hamblin. Based upon these representations, the court disqualified the office and denied the expungement under the governing statute. Because of the disqualification order, conflict counsel was appointed to prosecute the Utah County District Court brought against Mr. Hamblin because of the aforementioned investigations. That same conflict counsel, approximately a year into prosecuting the Utah County District Court, was appointed to the bench. Before taking the bench conflict, counsel asked the court in Utah County District Court to reconsider the disqualification order and limit the order to the expungement matter. The court disagreed and kept the ruling in place, reasoning that the ruling was global and nothing substantially new or different had been presented to justify the modification of the disqualification. When later asked to reconsider its decision, the Utah County District Court declined to do so. In its ruling, the Utah County District Court noted that while the state did discuss the possibility of implementing a barrier to neutralize the admitted conflicts, no evidence was presented in showing that such a plan was ever implemented, and thus the court could not find that the office had dissipated the conflict. Quote, Utah courts have found disqualification proper whenever a prosecutor has conflict of interest with the charges or the defendant, end quote. Conflict of interest means, quote, a real or seeming incompatibility between two interests that one possesses or is obligated to serve. They go through some case law here, blah, blah, blah. As stated at the outset of this ruling, defendant is charged with the same crime as Mr. Hamblin, and the charges are based on the same alleged facts and conduct that they allegedly engaged in together. Like Mr. Hamblin's defense counsel, defendant's counsel believes Mr. Levitt could be called as a witness in this case and might even become a defendant. As the Utah County District Court noted, it was the attorney's office who first broached the issue of a conflict with the court and who repeatedly indicated that it was the office that had experienced a difficult election relating to Mr. Levitt as superior and supervisor, and that because of the state would not oppose a global conflict disqualification. For this court to now permit the office to prosecute the defendant, who is Mr. Hamblin's co-defendant, would be the equivalent of shutting the stable door after the horse has bolted. Okay. This court believes that public confidence in the prosecutorial process is crucial. For the above reasons, the defendant's motion for recusal of the Utah County Attorney's Office is granted. Okay. Wow. So, again, David Levitt really seemed to mess everything up here by naming himself as a person of interest. I mean, there you have it. More on Roselle Hamblin Stevenson at a later date, but very quickly before I move on, I want to just go to, I'll remove this here. I want to go to the Salt Lake Tribune. I'm going to share this tab. The Bennions, they seem to be on a PR tour. So the Salt Lake Tribune, did a piece on the Bennions. And I got to say, this is my opinion here, but I feel like this is really bad PR to continue to draw attention to yourself. I wouldn't play things out this way. That's just me. But the Bennion's lawyer has actually requested that the Utah Attorney General, Derek Brown, issues a letter which would declare that prosecutors have declined to file charges against the Bennions. They want to completely clear their name. And I mentioned this on a previous episode. But a sheriff's office spokesperson, and this is based on the Salt Lake Tribune's reporting, on Tuesday, this is last Tuesday, declined to respond to that letter that was sent to them by the Bennion's attorney requesting that they be cleared, but added that its officials had been meeting with the Attorney General's office and other prosecutors about the case and the investigation. And the Attorney General's office did not respond to the Bennion's lawyer or to the Salt Lake Tribune. But keep in mind, just a few weeks ago, and I played this on an episode, Sheriff Mike Smith of the Utah County Sheriff's Office stated at a private event, yet a live streamed event, that they are still investigating the ritual abuse allegations. Let me remove this here. And I want to close out on a couple things here. I want to close out with some coverage on a vigil that was held over the weekend, and also with an update on David Levitt's disciplinary appeal hearing on Friday, February 18th. So I'm going to pull up a Fox 13 article because they did some really good reporting on this, but I feel like this whole thing really just ties in to David Levitt's narcissism. And it's truly unbelievable, in my opinion. I mean, the guy literally moved to Scotland. He lives in another country, and he's just so full of himself that he can't just drop it. He can't just accept that he made a mistake in the past. And he's got to draw, again, more attention to himself. And it's crazy. So Fox 13 did provide some more context into why he was disciplined. And this is based on a 2019 event. And it's bad, guys. It's bad. No matter how big of a piece of crap or how big of a perv you might be, the Constitution says that you are entitled to a fair trial. You have a right to a fair trial. And yeah, that includes people like David Lee Hamblin. So, David Levitt, a seasoned prosecutor in 2019, went on television in yet another press conference, and he announced that he would be seeking the death penalty on a case against a man who has now been convicted, by the way, on this awful, horrific double murder of two teenagers. This man, his name is Jared Baum. And in this press conference, Levitt said things about Baum that no DA should say knowingly. He should have known this would taint a jury pool and it would deny the defendant their right to a fair trial. But more importantly, this would affect and prevent the victims' families from getting justice and just cause this criminal case to be dragged out even more than it should be. So the families of the victims here had to deal with a lot because of David Levitt's narcissistic actions. I mean, the problems and the heartache it caused is just, it's not okay. And again, isn't that seemingly the David Levitt way? He plays by his own rules. And I mean, he had to have known better, but his ego, it always seems to get the best of him. It really does. So I'll pull up this article from Fox 13 and I'll read part of it to you all. Because again, I'm thrilled that they are back reporting on all of this. They had taken a bit of a hiatus here. And this is by Adam Herbitz. Former Utah County Attorney David Levitt appeared before the Utah Supreme Court on Friday in an effort to appeal disciplinary sanctions imposed against him. He was issued a public reprimand in 2022 for making inappropriate and unethical statements at a July 2019 news conference. During the 2019 news conference, I went over this. He announced he'd be seeking the death penalty against Jared Baum. Baum was accused of murdering two teens in 2017 before throwing their bodies into a mine shaft. In 2019, Levitt described Baum as having treated the victims like, quote, garbage or trash. Levitt also referenced evidence that, quote, the jury will never hear. Oh my gosh. The Utah Office of Professional Conduct determined that Levitt's statements violated rules intended to ensure a fair trial. You think? They say that Levitt should have known better. Quote, he was aware that he was holding a press conference to announce the death penalty for the first time in 40 years in a very populated county and a very well-publicized case. He nevertheless chose to go ahead and make the statements that he made. Wow, I actually didn't realize that it was the first death penalty sought in 40 years. Okay, that's wow, that's crazy. According to the OPC, Levitt testified that he quickly realized his statements would pose problems, and he later declared a conflict of interest, walling himself off from the prosecution. Okay. The Utah County Attorney's Office stopped pursuing the death penalty in 2021, and Baum was convicted in 2022 and sentenced to life in prison. The OPC argued Levitt's statements did not directly affect the outcome of the case, but slowed down the judicial process. That's what I had mentioned. The statements led to additional court filings, wasting government time and taxpayer dollars. And yes, it affected the victims' families who most likely just wanted to move on here and get a conviction. Attorneys for the OPC argued Levitt knew he would prejudice the case by referencing evidence that would not be admissible at trial by stating, quote, we know things that the jury would never hear. I mean, it's like it was his first day on the job. He referenced inadmissible evidence, but didn't give any information about what that evidence was. I'm kind of skipping through here. Attorneys for the OPC stated Levitt was not remorseful until it was too late, failing to take responsibility until after the misconduct proceedings began. The Utah Supreme Court has not yet issued a decision. After the hearing, Fox 13 News asked Levitt if he was remorseful. Quote, I know they talked about whether you were actually remorseful or whether you were remorseful after the fact. Do you want to clear that up? Fox News 13 asked. No, Levitt said. I think my lawyers have done a great job articulating my position. Beyond that, Levitt declined to comment on this case. Quote, I think the whole point of this case is that I shouldn't be talking to the media about it, Levitt laughed. I think it raises important issues. It's good to have some of these issues clarified. Wow, I'm glad that he thinks that this is funny. Truly, I'm glad that Fox 13 noted that he kind of laughed about this because I'm fairly certain the families of the two victims that Jared Baum killed would not find this funny at all. And they would not have found anything funny from 2017 up until now pertaining to the deaths of their loved ones. I mean, he's ridiculous. He's so ridiculous. And that's my opinion. That is my opinion. And oh, one more thing. This is kind of funny to me. Speaking of laughing, it says here, quote, Levitt's attorneys argue that his punishment should be lessened because he is remorseful and has a good reputation. Sorry. It's not funny, I guess. He's remorseful and he has a good reputation. Does he, though? Curious to Utah locals, does he have a good reputation here? All right. Wow. So yeah, so this guy, I mean, again, he won't go away. But back to the vigil that was held this weekend. It was spearheaded by Jason and Alexia Preston of We Are the People as David Levitt's wife, Shalom, the sex researcher who believes that 3-year-olds touch themselves for pleasure and we should encourage it, was set to speak at the Utah Coalition Against Pornography on Saturday, March 1st. And a lot of people felt like she did not have the right to speak there. They were concerned about this. And they were also concurrently protesting a bill that would allow for sex offenders to get themselves removed from the sex offender registry after a certain period of time. Go Utah. But this vigil was very peaceful, and many survivors shared their stories and felt heard, felt seen, and just leaned on each other for support. And that to me, right there, really showed just how strong these people are. And they aren't going away. No matter how much certain prosecutors, certain judges, etc., allegedly want them to, they're not going anywhere. But I want to play a short news clip featuring commentary from Jason Preston of We Are the People, Utah.
Tonight over in Sandy, members of the We Are the People organization gathered to protest the trafficking and abuse of children in the Beehive State. Meeting at the Gail Miller Conference Center, rally-goers are protesting against what they call the lack of justice for known sex abuse victims. As well, attendees are rejecting a bill proposed by Representative Todd Weiler that would shorten the time a child rapist, sex abuser, or trafficker would spend on the sex offender registry.
As we've interviewed survivor after survivor, we're starting to see a very common thread is when they come forward for help to leaders and to people in the state, they're not getting help, they're getting silenced. And so I think we have a culture, and I think one of the other fascinating statistics is the amount of suicides, the youth suicides. And I think there's a direct correlation. When you abuse these children, when you silence their voices, when there's nowhere for them to go for help, it causes damage that can't be undone.
Organizers from the We Are the People say due to Utah's low prosecution rates, the state has become a dangerous place to raise children.
Well, all right. So that was Jason Preston of We Are the People, Utah. Let me exit off that. And again, I think it's so incredible, the vigil that they held and how many lives were just touched by this because they felt seen, they felt heard. And I think that's so important because, as they said, people are not being prosecuted and people are not being taken seriously by many individuals here. So I'll be back this week for another episode discussing the psychology of repressed memories and abuse survivors and victims. And I also did a live stream on my channel. I discussed the Ruby Frankie doc on Hulu, The Devil in the Family. And man, my view has really changed on the way I see that case from when I first heard about it last year and studying and diving into all of this. Yeah, I've really changed my tune here. So go ahead and listen to that live stream if you want my view on that. But thanks again for joining me here. I hope you like this new format. I'm going to try my hardest to keep up with it. But with that being said, stay safe, stay vigilant, and I'll see you next time. That 9